Welcome to Install from Heap, Episode 12, a Netrunner podcast from Rattlebox Games about jank, deck building, and cyberpunk nonsense. I'm Brendan Riley. Indexing. Today on Install from Heap, in exchange of information, we'll talk about where I've been and what I've been playing. In Frantic Coding, we'll talk about the return of the Professor. In Brain Rewiring, we'll talk about the card Universal Connectivity Fee. And in Exploratory Romp, we'll talk about the card Data Folding. Stick around. Exchange of information. Well, I'm back, episode 2, right on schedule, or episode 12, I guess. Nice to hear from you all in response to the last one. It was great to hear that I'm still in everybody's podcast feed, or at least a few of you. It's been interesting getting the podcast rolling again. Makes me start thinking about the game in a different way, and I've really enjoyed it. I've been thinking a little bit about how to reapproach a couple of the things we do. I've decided to stop numbering the segments and start using names of cards. This is something I've seen a number of other podcasts do. I particularly like the way Graham Carlson does it on Shipment from Shiloh. So the opening segment is called Indexing Now. And then this segment I'm calling Exchange of Information. So that's what we're doing. I've been playing mostly on Jinteki lately. Mostly because I don't have a lot of chance to play with the physical cards, although I am going to Fair Game in Downers Grove next week for their game night kit. It'll be the first really organized competitive play I've participated in, so I'm a little nervous, but even if I lose, I'm sure I'll have fun. I've also been enjoying the new Most Wanted list and the new rotation cards that have come out. As soon as the leak for the Most Wanted list came out last week, I started playing with those cards, assuming that was going to be true, and it turns out it was. I really like the way the game is going, or the way that those cards have changed what's happening in the game. It makes everything fresh, makes a lot of the old runners that had been kind of set to the side interesting again, and it's been fun. As you may or may not know, I do play a number of other games as well. I recently went to the Chicago Proto-Spiel with my design partner Rob from Rattlebox Games, and we tested out a number of games there. That was pretty fun, made some progress on projects we're working on, particularly our train puzzle game In the Loop, which I will talk about a little bit more in future because I like to. But this is a Netrunner podcast, so that's probably all I'll say about that this week. I did manage to pick up a couple other games as well that I'm excited to try. I got Queen's Architect and Lost Legends from Queen Games, both of which are decently reviewed and sounded interesting and are, for some reason, on fire sale prices. I think Queen is trying to get rid of stock before their fiscal year ends and they have to pay taxes on it or something, because I got them for crazy cheap. So even if they're not very good, I didn't waste any money and I can probably trade them or sell them. So that's the game playing news. Let's leap into the show. Thanks for joining us. Frantic Coding. I've decided to use Frantic Coding as the name of the deck building segment from now on because it's funny. Like I said, with the new rotation coming up and the new MWL coming out, the landscape has changed. Now, if you don't track the competitive scene very much, basically rotation says that the first 2 cycles of cards are going out of play, and the core set has been updated. I think I talked about this a little bit last time. You should go look at those lists. It's really interesting. Some of the sort of really big cards, the heavy pools of gravity that pulled Netrunner this way and that, have been removed, and so the landscape is very different now. There's no account siphon. Actually, there's no account siphon. It's probably the biggest one for me, and no medium. So 2 of the biggest runner tools are gone. There's a bunch of corp tools that have been removed as well, most prominently perhaps Jackson Howard. It's a whole new game out there. And one of the results of it being a whole new game is that we jank lords feel particularly emboldened, that nobody really knows what the meta is supposed to look like, so maybe some of those janky decks that we used to play with now have a chance again, which means that I've pulled out the Professor. The Professor is a Shaper ID from Creation and Control, the Shaper big box, and it's got the weirdest power of all, which is the first copy of each program in this deck does not count against your influence limit. The Professor has a 45 card deck. Here's the trick. He gets 1 influence. So you can pick one 1-point influence card to take into your deck, aside from the programs. In some ways, the new restricted band list really hits the professor hard because both Clone Chip and Magnum Opus are on the restricted and banned list. And that's really difficult for the professor because if you lose a program, you don't really have a way to get it back yet. Can't take any of the usual tools that you might take are not Shaper except for Clone Chip. And now if Clone Chip is on the restricted list, that means you can't also have Magnum Opus. So I've been trying to figure out how to work through that. But otherwise, the professor is actually looking pretty good. All the cards that were on the most wanted list that had extra influence, that has been done. That system has been done away with, which means that you can sample from all of the goods. As long as you are willing to deal with variance, which is one of the things I like about the professor so much, is it feels like they really captured the idea of being a professor, of dealing with a lot of different things and trying to figure out how they work together. In terms of theme, when you're playing the professor, or for those of you who don't know, I am actually a professor. My day job, I teach English. I trade my clicks for credits at a college called Columbia College here in Chicago. And on a good day, I feel like this guy from Dead Poets Society.
I didn't bring them up here to ridicule them. I brought them up here to illustrate the point of conformity, the difficulty in maintaining your own beliefs in the face of others. Now, those of you, I see the look in your eyes like,
I would have walked differently. Well, ask yourselves why you are clapping.
And we all have a great need for acceptance. But you must trust that your beliefs are unique, your own, even though others may think them odd or unpopular, even though the herd may go, that's bad. Robert Frost said, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference.
On a bad day, sometimes I feel like this guy from Community.
And that's how Paleolithic hunting tribes overtook early agricultural civilizations.
Oh, that's an interesting answer, Miss Edison.
Is it right?
I don't know. Don't care. But so far, you're all getting A's.
Are you sure everyone should get A's? It seems a little unfair to the people that actually studied.
Throw paper balls at her head until she sits down.
Sitting!
Good. Very good. A+ for all of you.
Professor Duncan, you are such a great teacher when you're drinking.
Thank you, Daryl. It's Troy.
Hopefully most of the time I'm somewhere between those two. So the professor is like the ultimate jank deck. Those of us who are Johnnies who want to get weird cards to work, the professor is a challenge because it feels like, oh man, you can have any program you want. But then a lot of the automatic tools that you might want to use or the things you might want to use have influence of some sort. You can't pull in any tools from any other faction really because you only get one influence. So I guess you could pull one influence card, but there aren't that many to use. Fortunately, Shaper does have a lot of good stuff. So I've been playing with the professor deck and I've been going back and forth. For a while, I was using Magnum Opus as my primary econ engine, but it was just too slow. So I've recently switched to something new, and I haven't even had a chance to play it yet. So this might die a fast death later today. I've decided to switch away from a click-based economy toward a drip economy, and I'm putting in 3 data folding, as well as the daily casts and the sure gambles. So the data folding becomes the primary sort of drip 3 credits a turn once I get all 3 of them installed. And then also pulling out Magnum Opus and putting in professional contacts. So every time I'm clicking, I'm getting a credit. Now you have to cycle through 5 cards to do that, but this is a heavy draw deck. So I will do that for certain. But taking out Magnum Opus also meant I got to put back Clone Chip, which means I can start running earlier. When I was using Magnum Opus, I didn't have Clone Chip in the deck, obviously, and there's very little recursion available, very little way to get your programs back out of the trash. And so as the professor, I found myself really hesitant to run early on, especially if I found one of my breakers. I have 2 of each kind, right? So I have 2 that do, I have 2 code gates and 2 sentries and 2 barrier breakers, and then I have a chameleon in there, which can be any of the 3, although it's a pain in the butt to use. So there's a good chance that, if our program gets trashed early, I'm kind of in trouble. But by putting in Clone Chip, I'm at least more able to get those back. Now, against Scorpios, I'm still in trouble, or against anything else that removes, an arc lockdown occasionally. That could still be trouble, but I do have a couple different options. We'll see. I'm still tinkering with it. I'm having trouble getting it down to 45 cards, which I know is a dumb choice. I will keep playing with the professor and let you know how it goes. Hopefully I'll see you online on gentechie.net. Again, Wombat929, if you ever want to hit me up for a game. I'm always excited to play. Brain Rewiring. As I mentioned last time, Brain Rewiring, which is about as easy to say as the old 30 Rock joke, rural juror. Brain Rewiring is the name of the new segment that I'm including in some episodes. This is the second one in a row, instead of my Executive Bootcamp segment, which was about teaching new players to play. And I'm certainly going to bring that back occasionally, but one of the things that I think the podcast was missing is that I wasn't talking about cyberpunk stuff enough. And so I think, aside from my theme discussion, I also want to talk a little bit about where Netrunner is drawing from our culture around us. And so, hence this segment. From now on, I'm not going to introduce the segment, but I thought second week, we may have some new listeners. Welcome, by the way, new listeners. So I thought Brain Rewiring today would be about an ultimate trap card. It's an NBN trap from the lunar cycle called Universal Connectivity Fee. What this card does is it's a trap. It says the runner loses one credit unless the runner is tagged. If the runner is tagged, he or she loses all credits in his or her credit pool, and the corp trashes the Universal Connectivity Fee. And the flavor text says, it's a small one-time fee, apparently. Only I've paid it 17 times. And you see there's a credit or a big coin with the Vitruvian Man on it. Going into some sort of box, like you have to paying admission to get into something. And it's really a powerful trap if you stick it right behind a data raven, because a lot of times people will take the data raven tag and then they'll clear it after the run. But if you have this right behind it, then you get to take all their money. And especially if there's another ice behind that they needed to pay to break through, you can really rock them. And I've done that once. And I thought of that because there was a news article on one of my favorite websites about consumer issues. That's consumerist.com. And the headline was, more regular hotels discover the joy of charging, quote, resort fees, end quote, for normal amenities. So the Wall Street Journal covered that a lot of hotels are now starting to charge extra fees for things that should be included. Like at the Best Western near Disneyland, you're going to pay $5 per day for the privilege of having a heated pool and spa on the property. So there's like a fee added on for that. Other places will charge $30, like the Crown Plaza Times Square charges $30 a day for the pool, fitness center, internet access, and free drinks. But it doesn't matter if you're using them or not. So hotels have started including these fees. And the trick is that if you book from their website, you see the fees. The fees are included in when you search, and then you can see them. If you book through a third-party website like Travelocity or Expedia, those fees don't always make it into their system. And so then you end up getting there and it costs more than you think. And then hopefully, as far as the hotel's concerned, you get mad at the booking website. It's interesting, though, because there's a lot of conversation about the idea that you shouldn't be able to tack on fees that everyone has to pay. I think there's an argument to be made, well, that's not a fee then, that's part of the rate. If everyone has to pay it, it should be part of the rate. To call it a fee is misleading. So I was reminded of one of my favorite musical acts, Flight of the Conchords, with Jermaine Clement and Brett McKenzie. As they're New Zealanders, they sing funny songs. And this song in particular, or this card in particular, reminded me of a sequence from their song Too Many Mother Uckers, which is a song in which they almost swear, and they're talking about all of the problems that life presents you and how everybody's messing with you. And this is Jermaine singing about the perils of hidden fees in banking.
I pay my mother-ucking rent fortnightly. Mother-uckers at the bank trying to pay me. And amount from my account goes out on AP. On AP! Yeah, you know me. Mother-ucker charge a $2 transaction fee. Makes my payment short, my rent comes back to me. Minus a $25 penalty. So you feed me, cause of your mother-ucking fee. Read the word on my ATM slip. Said we're all mother-uckers and we're ucking with this shit. Come on. Too many mother-uckers ucking with my shit. My transaction shit.
So one of the things I really like about Universal Connectivity Fee is the way that it taps into this experience that we have, right? That everybody has to pay the credit. But if they know who you are, then they can ding you for more. Perhaps they can charge you a bunch of times or something, right? That's a fee you didn't expect to see, and it shows up everywhere. Sort of like those fees at the bottom of your cable bill or your cell phone bill that vary each month for some reason. Sometimes you're paying them and sometimes you're not. And there's little weird taxes and all sorts of crazy stuff. So it seems like Universal Connectivity Fee taps into something we're already experiencing, right? And suggests just an acceleration of that experience. So now your brain is rewired. Breaking news. We here at Rattlebox Games are regular attendees at something called Toggle Gaming in Palatine, Illinois, where we have lots of colleagues and friends who play games and develop games. Some of our friends there have a Kickstarter going on right now, and I wanted to mention it. I can affirm that this game is really fun and have myself backed a copy. You guys should definitely check out this new drinking game called Bow Ties. It's on Kickstarter now. In the game, players clip bow tie-shaped cards to their shirt collars. The collars have drinking rules on them like, tell me to drink when I smile, or tell me to drink when I touch my hair. But the catch is that no one knows their own rule. So when friends tell you to drink, you have to figure out why. The best part about bow ties is that it can be played at parties, bars, or really any social event because no matter what you're doing, the rules are always in effect. You can also take it to the next level by playing another drinking game and bow ties at the same time. As somebody who doesn't drink alcohol, I can attest that it's fun even if you're not getting extra lubricated. It can be a fun game that you play for points over the course of the night. When you figure yours out, you take the card and put it in your pocket and draw another card. Bow Ties is out now on Kickstarter, so check it out. And now back to the show. Exploratory Romp. Exploratory Romp is my new name for my favorite segment of the podcast, really, which is a discussion of theme of cards. So in this section, reminiscent of the running on italics column on stimhack.com, I look at a card and I think about it and I evaluate it in terms of gameplay, but also in terms of theme. How well does it do to present the game to us? Today's card from my professor deck is Data Folding. Data Folding is a 3-credit resource. It's neutral, which means the professor can have it, and it's a virtual resource, so I guess it can fall to Foxfire, although Foxfire is rotating out, I believe. It says, when your turn begins, gain 1 credit if you have 2 or more unused MU. And it's got a long flavor quote. It says, sometimes I like to make origami cranes out of old news rags. It helps me think, putting it back on the subconscious. I figure it's the same principle for my rig. Keep it busy, and it makes me a few creds for my trouble. Quetzal. The picture shows what basically looks like a paper airplane rendered in kind of the digital etherealness that is part of the Netrunner style. And so you get this idea of Quetzal letting her rig run when she's not using it and having it earn money for her. And this reminded me of something that's happening right now, which is the SETI at Home project. SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They use radio telescopes to scan the sky for signals. If you've seen the movie Contact, that's probably the best representation of it in media that I've seen. The SETI at Home project lets you use your computer to help with those kinds of processing projects. So when you're not using your computer, it can help them. This is a really interesting idea, the data folding, the idea that you would run your rig when you're not using it and it would get you money because you got to sleep or whatever. I think it's a really clever card. It costs you 3 to install, so you have to hook up your system and set it up so that you can get paid. But then when you're not working, your rig earns you a credit every day. So, after 3 turns, you've made your money back, and after 4 turns, you're ahead. So I think it's a really interesting card. I also like the idea of using data to make other data, right? She says, make origami cranes out of old news rags, the idea of making something new out of the stuff that's already there. And so the picture of the paper airplane, I think, fits very well. Though I don't know why they picked a paper airplane and not, say, a crane. Maybe that's too on the nose. But another more traditional origami creature seems like it would help more than an airplane. So I think I got to ding it a little bit for that. But otherwise, it's a really good card, and it fits the theme really well, I think. So I'm going to go A- for data folding. Au revoir. As you can tell, I named my final sequence Au revoir, which is French for goodbye, and is also the name of a card, of course. Well, that wraps up Install from Heap, episode 11. If you have suggestions for future topics or comments on the show, I'd love to hear them. You can send email to brendan@rattleboxgames.com or tweet to rattleboxgames. You can also visit our website, rattleboxgames.com, to subscribe to our newsletter, or follow the link to our forums on BoardGameGeek.com, where my username is Wombat929. I also post announcements about the show on the StimHack forums, so you can look for them and chat with me there. I'd always enjoy losing a game of Netrunner to you on gintechie.net, where my username is also Wombat929. See you next time, but until then, remember, when all your best cards end up in the trash, you can always install from Heap. Today's media clips were from Dead Poets Society, Community, and The Flight of the Conchords. Brett somebody. Crap. I have to redo that. Hold on. Brett McKenzie. Okay.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.